Sheets are a vital way of communicating design data between different disciplines. In this module, you understand how sheets are created and how to organise the project browser in larger projects. You also work with sheet duplication tools to expedite the creation of new sheets. The objective domains covered are 4.1a, Understand Browser Organisation, and 4.1f, Set up a sheet. Sheets are a critical part of your design and inform the contractor what to build. They also form the contractual documents and outline the legal obligation between the employer and the contractor. The sheets in Revit are families which can be created in various sizes with customised graphics and information. Larger projects will require organisation and management of sheets to maintain quality and efficiency. Revit has sheet collections and browser organisation which can be utilised to organise views and sheets into logical groups and folders. Go ahead and open up the model 032, Setting up and Managing Sheets. The project opens in the 3D view. Our first task is to create a new sheet and then place a material takeoff onto that sheet. To do this, we'll select the View tab, and in the Sheet Composition panel, we'll select Sheet. In the New Sheet dialog box, currently we have two sheets loaded into our active project. The one we're going to use here is B11 by 17. We'll go ahead and select OK. Looking at the information on the sheet, we can clearly see here that the view is unnamed and the sheet number is set to S016. In the Properties palette, we can see that we have a sheet name parameter and currently here it's unnamed. Let's enter in Material Takeoff. Taking our cursor back into the sheet view, we can then see Material Takeoff has been attributed correctly to the sheet. We'll now place the Material Takeoff schedule onto the sheet. To help us find this, in the project browser you'll notice here that we have a search bar. In the search bar we'll enter the term Material. As I type in the word Material, you can see that the project browser is then filtered and searched on this term. Looking under the Schedules and Quantities node, I can now clearly see that we have our Material Takeoff. We'll then drag and drop this onto the sheet and we'll left click to position this where we want it. We'll then clear the search from the project browser. Looking back into the project browser, if we study our structural plans, we can see here that the project browser displays a blue square indicating that the model view is placed onto a sheet. Looking at the sheets below, we can easily identify that the sheets with views have a plus indicator, which is indicating that we can then collapse or expand these nodes. So for example, if I expand the north and south elevation here, I can then see the two model views placed onto the sheet. Looking at the sheet S012, I can clearly see that there are no model views placed onto this sheet. So let's double click it to open the sheet up, and we'll now place our second floor model view onto this sheet. So we'll scroll back to the top of the project browser, and under the structural plans we can clearly see here that we have a corresponding model view. We'll notice that the icon isn't currently blue, which is indicating that this isn't placed on the sheet. To place this, we'll drag and drop the second floor plan onto the sheet and we'll left click to position this where we want. We can also now see that we have the full floor plan, which again is not currently placed onto a sheet. Now this will have a very similar title block and configuration to our 02 second floor plan. So rather than going through the process of creating a new sheet and then manually trying to place the view in the same place on the drawing sheet, we can simply duplicate the sheet. So, scrolling back down to the project browser here, we can see our new sheet that we've just created, 012. We'll right mouse click over this, and in the context menu, we'll go to Duplicate Sheet. We can then see that we have some options here, so we can either just duplicate an empty sheet, we can duplicate a sheet with some detailing, so that will copy things like text and annotations and so on, or we can duplicate with model views. Now of course, when we duplicate with model views, Revit would also need to duplicate that model view because you can't have one view on multiple sheets. So here, we'll just go ahead and say duplicate. Looking into the project browser again, we can now see that we have a copy of our S012 sheet. So of course the drawing number has been appended and of course the sheet name is the same. Let's now amend these, so back into the Properties palette, we'll change the sheet number to S013 and the sheet name will become 04 4th floor GA. Moving back into the sheet view here, we can now see that the sheet information has updated. Now of course the problem here is we've still got the second floor plan placed out on the 4th floor sheet. So we'll select the viewport and then looking up onto the Modify Viewports tab, you can see here that we can control the justification of the viewport and also the model view. So of course here we can simply swap this for the 04 4th floor plan. As we do this, we'll notice that the positioning is identical to the second floor. We can also use guide grids to help us understand positioning on drawing sheets. To do this, on the View tab in the Sheet Composition panel, we can select Guide Grid. In the Assign Guide Grid dialog, we can give this a name, so I'm just going to leave this as Guide Grid 1 and select OK. You'll then notice that the guide grid is placed onto the sheet. If we move to the edge of the guide grid and select it, we can see that we can change the guide spacing. Currently it's set to 1 inch. We'll go ahead and change this to 6 inches. And now we could use the guide grid to position other views such as schedules and legends and so on. To ensure that we get the same positioning on all the sheets, we can go to another sheet, for example this sheet here, S012. We can go back to the Guide Grids tool and again place out the same guide grid. It's also worth noting that guide grids do not print. Next we'll create a sheet collection for the steelwork contractor. To do this, in the project browser we'll right mouse over the sheets node and from the context menu we'll choose New Sheet Collection. The new collection has been created and it's currently named Collection 1. We'll go into the Properties palette and we'll change the name from Collection 1 to Steelwork Contractor. To help us find the views that we want to actually put into this new collection, again we'll go to the Project Browser search bar and we'll type in the term steel. This would of course filter and search the project browser for anything that contains the word steel. But also I can see I've got a number of sheets containing that same term. So I'm now going to hold down a Control key and select S005. We'd also select S014 and 015. Once again, looking into the Properties palette, we can see that the sheet collection is currently set to none. However, we can now choose the Steelwork Contractor sheet collection, and we can now see that those drawings have been added to our newly created sheet collection. Once again, we'll go ahead and clear the filter. Another way of organising a project browser is to use browser organisation. We'll do this for sheet types. So I'm going to select the Sheets node, right mouse, and here we'll select Browser Organisation. In the Browser Organisation dialog under Sheets tab, we'll create a new browser organisation. For the name we'll enter Sheet Type. We can then go ahead and select OK. In the Browser Organisation properties, we'll begin by selecting Grouping and Sorting, and here we can set up various rules to help us group and sort the sheets. We'll begin by selecting Sheet Type, and then we'll organise them by sheet number. We'll then select OK, and we'll ensure that the Sheet Type Browser Organisation is active, and then we'll select OK. So we can now see that our browser organisation has been applied to our drawing sheets. We can see the Sheets node, and underneath the Sheets node we can now see our sheet collection as well as these custom folders. Let's open up the Plans folder, and perhaps we'll select one of the sheets here, so I'm going to open up S001 and select the sheet. Looking into the Properties palette, we can see here that we have a parameter titled Sheet Type, and you can see here it has a value entered for plans. This is how we can organise our sheets. Now looking back into the project browser, I can clearly see here there's a folder with 3 question marks. If I expand this and we have a look at what's inside here, we can see that we've got our 2 new sheets that we've just created, so sheet number 12 and 13, and also our material takeoff. Let's begin by selecting our second floor GA plan, and looking back into the Properties palette under Sheet Type parameter, we can see that there's currently no value here. Of course, we'll then go ahead and select Plans, and you'll see now that's moved out of the question mark folder into the Plans folder. We'll do a similar thing for sheet number 13, so we'll select our sheet. Again, in the Properties palette, we'll select Plans. And finally here we can see that we've got one more sheet under the question marks folder, which is our material takeoff. We'll create a new folder for this. So going back into our properties palette for the sheet type, in here we'll now create a new folder called material takeoffs. Back into the project browser, we've got a new folder with that sheet entered inside. So sheet collections and browser organisation are vital when trying to manage complex large projects.